If you're like me and you've used previous versions of Excel, like older versions of 2003 or XP, and you've actually created workbooks that you're still using, you may want to consider upgrading those workbooks to the current version of Excel 2007. Because some of the advantages of using Excel 2007, probably the greatest one is it includes a smaller file size by up to 75% using a zip compression, which means it requires less disk space and also less bandwidth if you're sharing this across a network, and also less time to download if you're emailing this to somebody. Also, different data components are stored separately, which means if part of the component in a file is damaged, you'll still be able to open it. So there's more stability in 2007. I don't know if you had a previous Excel workbook, payroll, that you couldn't open, but if part of it was damaged, well, in 2007 you ought to be able to open up and work on part of it. But then again, with anything, if it's damaged enough, you won't be able to use it at all. But at least with 2007 you got a better chance than the older versions of Excel. So if I convinced you, how do you go ahead and convert your older versions of Excel to the newer version 2007, and how do you even tell that they've been upgraded or converted? Well, first of all, if you look up in the title bar of this workbook, you can see the name of the workbook is Sales. And then over to the right, or you have a dot, and then XLSX. I don't know if you can see that, but anything that's created in 2007 will always have XLSX. Any older versions, you won't have that extra X. It'll just be XLS. And this .xls is what's called an extension. Now what are extensions? Well, you can watch a training video on Windows Vista Level 1 and I go over this in depth with both Word documents as well. But what that does is it actually tells the operating system like Windows Vista that I have here, or if you have Windows XP, what program is associated with this file that you're trying to open up. Because if you try to open up a file and it opens up the wrong program, like let's say I try to open up my workbook here in a Word document, that's not going to work, is it? In fact, you might get a bunch of garbled coding here, and maybe that's happened to you, maybe it hasn't. But in any case, you've got your name that you can identify with different files, and also to the right of this dot is the extension that the operating system can identify which programs to open up these files in. For example, let me take it a step further. I'm going to close out of the workbook and double click and open up the exercise folder. And in this folder, like any folders you have on your desktop, you may have images, you may have documents. Well, I have nothing but workbooks here. And out of all these workbooks, there's only one of them that was created in an earlier version of Excel, like 2003. Everything else was created in 2007. Well, how do I know? Well, first of all, if you can look at the extensions, you can see here XLSX, and all of them have it except Convert, which is XLS. Well, first of all, you're saying, I don't have that on my computer. I can't see my extensions. Well, by default, Windows Vista has these shut off. You can't see them, and probably for a good reason too, because if you ever try to rename a file here and you delete the extension, well, I'll show you that in just a second. It can get messy. But first of all, if you can't see the extensions, let me show you how to turn those on, and you may want to watch the Windows Vista Level 1 training video if that's a good plug for it. In any case, you want to come up here and click on your Tools menu and go down to Folder Options. Well, if you can't find your menu here, again, we cover that in Windows Vista Level 1, you want to turn that on. How do you turn it on or bring it up? Click on the Organize button here and go down to Layout, and then go over and click on the menu bar. When I click on it, of course it disappears, and I can bring it up again one of two ways. I can hold down the Alt key, which temporarily brings up the menu, okay, which again is a Windows Vista Level 1. Okay, never mind. We'll click off in a blank area, click on the Organize and go down to Layout, and to bring it up permanently, click on Menu bar, and see now it's up. So I can go to Tools, to Folder Options, click on the View tab, come down here, and do you see where it says Hide Extensions for known file types? Well, if I check it, let me click and drag the header of the window to move it out of the way, and I click Apply, boom, all those extensions disappear, which is probably what you see on your computer, because by default, operating systems don't turn that on. Because again, if you rename them, like I'm about to show you, let me uncheck that and click OK, and all my extensions come back. So if I rename them by either right-clicking and going down to rename, or click off in a blank area and select it and hit F2 on the keyboard. Again, this is all basic stuff in Windows Vista Level 1. You can go ahead and start typing, and notice how it just, in blue, it just selects the name of the workbook, and it doesn't include the XLS, because by default, Windows Vista doesn't want you to delete its file association with the program of Excel by deleting XLS, which I've done. Let's say, for example, I make the mistake and select all of it, and then type in a new name, and then hit Enter. It's going to say, what are you doing? I was associating this with Excel. Are you sure you want to do that? I go ahead and click Yes. And look, it changes the icon. It says, hey, I don't know what program to open this up in. Do you have any ideas? Well, maybe you got that from somebody who sent you a file and it was blank. Now, just because it's blank doesn't mean that it doesn't have an extension on. Doesn't mean you have to come up in here and turn on your extensions, right? It may mean that you don't have the program installed on your computer, because I may have all the extensions here and I have all white icons here, but I just may not have Excel installed on my computer, so there's no program to associate this file with because there's no program on the computer. For example, if somebody sends you a document like this or a file and it's blank, you can go ahead and call them back up saying, well, what extension is this? If they say it's QTW or something, it's like, well, what is that? And he says QuickBooks. You can say, well, I don't have QuickBooks on my computer. I can't open it up. And that would be correct. But I do know what this is, and we both know what this is. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on it and go down and left-click on Rename. Type in Convert, if I remember it right, dot. And I have to be careful about the extension because it was an XLS. Just that. It didn't have the extra X because it wasn't 2007. And hit Enter. And automatically Windows Vista identifies that as the program. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the program that's right for that file, because you could actually add an XLS to like even documents or other files, and when you double click it'll open it up and it'll say, look, I open it up in the program, and you get a bunch of different codings and stuff because you open it up or associated with it with the wrong program. So in which case you may want to change your extension again. Okay, that's probably a little bit more depth than you care about, but let me hurry and race on here. First of all, we want to identify whether this is a previous version of Excel or if it's a current version 2007 by extensions. Well, now that we settled that argument here that you may or may not have them on, the other is looking at the icon. I don't know if you can see this because my view is so small here, but that X right there is a little bit larger than all these other X's. In fact, let me change the views. If I click on the view arrow and I go to something large, there we go. See that X right there? It's a lot different than all these other X's, isn't it? These other X's are the new associations for 2007, so you can identify that, hey, this is an Excel workbook in 2007. Of course, aside from the extra X there, which this doesn't have. So there's two ways of identifying a workbook, is by the icon here from 2007 or the extra X that this workbook doesn't have. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Views arrow and go down to List. It's easier for me to see this and click off in a blank area. Now before I convert this workbook, because it's really easy, I'm going to go ahead and shrink this window, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold down the Control key and then click and drag. And you see that little plus sign where it says Copy to Desktop? That's because I'm holding down the Control key and I'm left clicking and dragging this to my desktop. I'm going to let go of my left mouse button, let go of the Control key, and I have a copy now. The whole reason for this is because, well, they're copies, aren't they? So if I hover over this, what's the size? It's 20 kilobytes. What does it say on the note? That this is an older version, somewhere between Excel 97 and 2003. So now I'm going to convert the one in the folder here, and we're going to compare it to the older version once I convert this to a newer version. So let me go ahead and double click on it, opens it up. Click on the Office logo button. Now a couple things also you're going to notice in addition if this workbook was created in an older version and not in 2007 is first of all the Convert button. Also up here, see where it says Convert and then it has compatibility mode. This isn't its native format here, so it's working with you to at least open up older versions of Excel. So to simply convert this, just go ahead and click on the Office logo button, come down and click on Convert. Then it'll say, hey, this action is going to convert it to the current file format, which is Excel 2007, and this will allow you to use all new features of Excel and also reduce the file size. Some of the new features that are pretty cool include that you can shade your cells by bar graph, like for example 100 maybe be only a seventh of the cell here shaded in red, where 700 we're getting up there, it'll shade it all the way over to maybe about 70% or 3/4 of the way of the cell in different colors, and also use a variety of new color palettes. So instead of saying new features, it probably ought to say new cool features. In any case, what I'm going to do is go ahead and click OK. It says the conversion completed successfully. It deleted the old version, but now to use the current version you have to close this out and reopen it up, or I can do it for you. So do you want to close and reopen the workbook? Go ahead and click yes. It closed it down, reopen it. It's no longer in compatibility mode. It has that extra X again, which stands for Extensible Markup Language, a new more stable programming language for 2007. And then also you click on the Office logo button, there's no Convert button here as well. So let me click off in a blank area, close out, and when you look inside the folder here, there it is. There's no extra convert.xls. It actually deleted it and replaced it with XLSX, the updated version. And look, the file size is 12 kilobytes, isn't it? Remember what the older one was? Let me come over here. And I clicked off in a blank area because if you don't click to select the window, like for example if I come over here and I try to hover over it, nothing comes up because this window isn't active. So if I click on it, make it active, and hover over it, it gives me 12 kilobytes. So I click off, hover over this, 20 kilobytes. Wow, it's like 70-75% that I saved on disk space alone, which probably doesn't mean anything to me, but if I email that to somebody, they're downloading it, that makes a world of difference. We're all about getting things quick, aren't we? Okay, click off in a blank area, and I can come back in here and double click and open that. Converted just fine, close out. Of course, my older version, double click on it. It still opens up in compatibility mode because it's not 2007. So there's a few subtle ways you can tell if it's been converted or if it's in 2007 format or an older format.